right, well, thank you too. My name is Anthony Vigliotti. I am the Chief Product Officer here at AdLib. It's a really exciting day for us. We are announcing our release of the 2023.2 Transform solution. Myself and Kunal will be going through many of the innovation and advanced features that we brought to market with this particular release. I have 20 years experience in the business process optimization and workflow automation space, with many roles in nuanced document imaging, with Kofax, obviously with Notable Solutions, and starting my career at Xerox. But most importantly, my role here at AdLib is to make certain that we understand the voice of customer, and we bring those requirements back into the organization, seriously contemplate bringing them to market, and prioritizing those particular features into the release. So what I'm pleased to say today is that this was highly influenced by our customer base. So many of you have spoken up. Many of you have put your feature requests in, either through direct dialogue with us, through formal request through the product team, or just good candid conversation that we've had amongst the our partner community. So really thank you for your insight, your intelligence, and helping us improve the product over time. I'm really pleased to have Kunal with me today. Kunal, next slide, please. Kunal is a member of my team and a product manager responsible for the Transform product. So Kunal, if you don't mind, introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kunal Bagotra, I have been with AdLib for just about 4 years now. I think Anthony covered a lot of the main bullet points as it relates to this release and a lot of what we want to go over with you today. But my role with AdLib is overseeing the Transform product line, which is what we're going to be covering off with our latest innovations. What we're really excited about is not just the accomplishments of this release, but as Anthony mentioned, I think just the accomplishments that we've hit over the course of the year in direct engagement and collaboration with our clients, partners, and just making sure that we continue to innovate the product, not only with our understanding of the market and the things that we do well and the things that we want to continue to improve at, but also what we're hearing directly from our clients as well. So we'll be going through that sort of in a back and forth. We'll have some slides that we'll cover off, and then in between I'll also be diving into the product, and I'll be showing a bit more of a sort of a hands-on view with some product demonstrations over the course of the presentation as well today.
All right, perfect, Kunal. Thank you. As Kunal said, we will be covering a few points here today about the new 2023.2 release for Transform. If you have any questions along the way, make certain to use the QA panel. I'll be moderating that QA panel and taking any questions along the way or queuing them up from the end. With this particular dialogue, Kunal and I are going to have this informal chat. We'd like you to participate as best you can through that QA panel. But on the agenda today are some pretty cool features around Transform 2023. One of them we're kind of informally coining set and forget. So this is really about workflow automation and taking the steps that your manual users have and allowing AdLib to take those manual steps and automate those manual steps. So we'll help you understand what we mean by that and exactly how that's done through demo within Transform. Second is this concept of pixel perfect rendering. We'll show you some examples today as to how the AdLib rendering engine compares to those of our competitors. We also have the opportunity here to talk about some job prioritization and some job cancellation that has recently been added to the product. So for those jobs that are mission critical, we have the opportunity to move them higher in the queue. For those jobs that are less critical, move them down in the queue, and obviously cancel jobs that are no longer needed in the queue. On fourth on the list is containerization. This is the opportunity to take your deployment, wrap it up into a container, and allow to use that container to migrate servers or to elastically scale your environment. Fifth is the concept of taking the analytics dashboard or the analytics information that exists within Transform and allowing you to use your existing performance monitoring systems to build dashboards with the data and content and information that we provide. And lastly is a regulatory validator. More on that as we move through the slides. So Kunal, please, next step.
Sure.
So this particular first topic is around set and forget. And what I really mean by that, if you go to the next slide, is if you take a look at your environment no doubt has countless mission critical documents within your environment. And those mission critical documents are exactly that, mission critical. They contain information, they contain data, they contain insight. You know, you may argue the lifeblood of your particular organization for particular workflows. So they're important. You also get those documents through various sources. You know, they may be emailed to your organization. They may be created by applications within your organization. They may be sent to you by way of fax server. Maybe you have an existing document management system or repository. No doubt you have various sources within your environment, and this requires people to constantly monitor these locations and take action once these mission critical documents are received. Now, once these mission critical documents are received, you typically need to do something with them to have benefit within your organization. And where AdLib adds tremendous value is around the assembly and rendering and the compilation of, essentially manipulating. So we can add content to these documents in the way of header and footer, table of contents, headers, watermarks, table of figures. We can merge multiple files together. We can take elements of one file and put that into a second file. So the list goes on as to the number of process steps that people would manually have to do today. And lastly, you have your output destinations. So within your organization, you have your finance department, your legal department, potentially an engineering department, operations, and they all have their different ways and different methods to get these documents in and have different requirements for what these documents should do. So Kunal, if you hit the button a few times, you'll start to see that as documents are received into the organization, there's various steps that have to be done. These steps typically are done by people, not only people that are just general experts in the organization, but largely subject matter experts within the organization. So what you get is like kind of this mess in the middle. And this mess in the middle, is essentially time, it's energy. In many cases, it's not value added work that these individuals are doing. So if you click one more time, Kunal, what we're about to share with you today is that AdLib Transform can sit in the middle of your mission critical document types and your output destinations and add that value. Take those steps off the plate of the physical worker and automate those steps by way of software. So what Kunal is about to show you is exactly that, taking some of these document types, some of your input and output sources, and show you how we can add an instruction set to automate this particular these steps in the process. So Kunal, take it away.
Absolutely. Just want to confirm, Anthony, that you can now see my screen.
I can see the management console, yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so what I want to go through is going over what Anthony showed, even just taking a little bit of a step back. For those of you who also may not be as familiar with this interface, this is the most recently launched version of the product. And what you can see here, as we see whenever we log in, is sort of this management console. This will always give you an overview of your system health. I see green checks across the board, which means nothing is on fire. But this just gives you a good overview immediately into your components of your system. And you have the side navigation panel here on the left-hand side of the screen. And what I can start doing here is if I jump over under my system settings to sources, if we think back to the slide we just saw, we have all these different documents that are emanating from various different sources. They could be sent in as email attachments. They could be submitted via folder sources through Microsoft SharePoint Documentum. What you're able to do on this page is that middleware mapping of AdLib's my piece in the middle, and I have my documents coming from X, and I need them to be placed back in that same repository. And this is where you go ahead and define your variety of sources that you want to. So in my case, I have an input folder that's constantly being pulled and monitored for jobs, and that's the file path that I'll be using. Once I submit my jobs into AdLib, and as you think of maybe that gear in the middle from the last slide, when all those sort of assembly steps are done across the process, the output destination here is, again, just another folder path that I've defined where then my final renditions and my documents of record will be placed. So that's all well and good. Now that my source is defined, what I want to be able to do is, to Anthony's point, go ahead and actually do something with those documents and create a set of business rules. So what you'll see here is on this job settings page, we have the ability to define what are known as instruction sets. These have two different elements to it. One is job acceptance rules, and the other is transformation rules. Job acceptance rules you can think of as more of sort of the job administration steps of your workflow. So how long do you want a job to run before it times out, so you avoid the process of long-running jobs? What priority do you want the jobs to be submitted as, which we'll go over later in the presentation. But then you have your transformation rules, and this is where you define what's actually happening to the document. So forget about the job administration now and think about more of the document assembly and creating those documents of record. So all across the left-hand side here, you'll see all these different options that we provide of different conversion options, such as all these different files we convert from the source file to PDF, as well as a bunch of different processing rules. But I don't necessarily even need to be an expert to navigate this. Let's say, for example, if I think back to Anthony's slide there, I saw one of the assembly steps was applying like headers and footers. If I'm that interested, I could come up to the search bar here, and if I type in footer, that's going to filter down to the rules that I'm looking for. And from here, what I could actually even just go ahead and show in real time here is what that process looks like of, I looked for the rule, I simply left-clicked, held, and dragged and dropped over to the right-hand side of the screen where sort of this rule creation panel is. Once it's in that panel with this little pencil icon, I can go ahead and expand the rule. And now I can simply just start editing the rule with whatever I want. So if I want to apply a footer, on the left-hand side of the footer, I'll put my name. I'll put Anthony's name in the middle. I can put Fireside Chat on the right. And so this is the beginning steps of me creating that footer. Now I can define, as you can see here, with just simple checkboxes and dropdowns, a vast set of rules, such as the margins. I'll even go ahead and I'll tweak the font a little bit. So I'll make it, I can make it green or blue even, and I'll go ahead and click OK, and then I'll save that. And so what that's done is it's now gone ahead and updated that set of business rules against my instruction set and against my sources. So if I go ahead and I'll just grab one file here, and I'll drop that into my input folder. Now, what you'll see here, I'll come back into the job settings page. And one thing I didn't mention up at the top is if you think back to sort of this canals folder source that I defined here, you can see that I've actually tied that folder source to this instruction set, meaning any changes I make here, such as the ones you just saw live on the screen, are going to act against any files that are dropped into that input destination. So if I go to my monitoring table, you'll see that that document has already completed processing. So if I now take a step back and I go to the output folder, what you'll see here, if all goes well, is, so this is the output PDF that was rendered, and I'll zoom in here. If we look a little closer towards the bottom, you can see a footer here, just as I defined it, Kunal on the left, Anthony in the middle, Fireside Chat on the right in blue font or in blue text. So hopefully that begins to illustrate a little bit of what it is that Anthony was speaking to up at the top with those slides. Anthony, pass it back to you there.
Yeah, perfect. So question for you. So we just like kind of administered one workflow. So that would be like one line, arrow from left to right on the chart that I showed earlier.
Right.
So what if the organization had multiple workflows that they need to administer? How is that done? What does that look like?
Actually, yeah, good question. So there's two different things there really. So one is, first of all, if I go back into we'll look at an isolated instruction set for now. You have all of these different rules that you can see that I've gone ahead and defined here for just that one instruction set, all these different conversion types based on what I understand my repository to be. I have that footer, I'll just get rid of that rule for now. But outside of that, if you want to define numerous workflows, we allow that as well. If you look up here, we have this option to be able to add multiple instruction sets. And what you can see here is I have that default instruction set that I normally use. I have an OCR instruction set that's specifically tailored to OCR jobs and jobs that I just want to scan an image or scan a document and extract that text layer. I have here one that's specifically for like overlays and securities. So what we allow you to do here is either within one specific instruction set or across instruction sets, it's however granular you want it to be, you can define those workflows. And if you even think back to the job acceptance rules that I put out, we know that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Some workflows and some documents are going to be very quick and easy to process. Some documents with like OCR and more complex settings might take a little longer. Understanding that maybe you want, from a job administration standpoint, a job timeout of like 30 seconds for this. So if a job runs over 30 seconds, time the job out. But for workflow number 2, you want that job timeout value to be like 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So it's really as granular as you want it to be. And that's why we enable you to make as many instruction sets or workflows that you want to be able to meet those business demands.
All right, outstanding. Thank you. So I think that's enough on this particular set and forget type of approach. If you don't mind going back to the slide.
Okay.
So hopefully you understand now that, when you look at that chart, if you take a look at your mission critical business processes and the manual labor that's put in place, AdLib in many cases can help augment the workers and remove some of those manual document related tasks that they may be doing and automate that by way of, transformation software. So the next topic we'd like to introduce is this notion of pixel perfect rendering. And if you go to the next slide, really like to show an example of what we mean by this pixel perfect rendering. So there are many OCR engines on the market today, some of which are free, some of which you pay for, some of which are cloud-based, but all of them have things that do extremely well and some things that they do some poorly. And they all kind of gauge themselves on OCR accuracy, 99.9% OCR accuracy. What that really means is that the text layer that is creating for that particular document has 99% accuracy. So you can search on it, and there's a text layer that's visible to the document underneath the document, but really not visible to the end user. Now, really what we mean by pixel perfect rendering is, yes, we OCR the document. It's highly accurate as well, but our goal is to really output a document that matches the original. Now, it sounds easy. It sounds like what you should expect to get, but I'm telling you, with a lot of the competitive solutions out there, that's not what you're getting. You get very highly accurate OCR layer, but you don't get a really good visual layer. So what you see on the far right is a competitive offering that is generating the original file that you see on the left. So you can see the pie chart kind of gets flattened. It's over, like, kind of running the legends that you see. And if this was in a regulatory, like, federal, financial services, insurance, life sciences, and you have to submit this to a governing body, likely these would be a rejected file. So not only is it bad form within your own organization, but may lead to follow-on failures downstream, depending on your type of business. So what Kunal is going to show you is live, actually, how we render these documents. What you see is the input document on the left, and the output of the document is the one you're about to see as part of the demo. Now we're going to kind of run a few documents through, and Kunal, why don't you start doing that while I'm talking to it. The first document is going to be the same file that you saw here with this budget spreadsheet. The second document you're going to see is kind of a document that it's a Word document, but somebody has pasted within that document an image. So Kunal, why don't you show that image isn't searchable?
I'm just going to drop those in the background there. So what you're going to see here is, first of all, I'll start with this Word document here. So what we have here is a simple Word document. This is all text. And what I've done here is we've embedded an image. And if you look here, I'm clicking around. This is nothing more than an image. Even if I try to hover over it with the cursor, there's no text that's actually being captured. So for example, if I'm going ahead and defining my rule set, I'm doing an MS Word to PDF conversion, but I'm also going to go ahead and add a rule in for OCR. And again, if we go back to OCR accuracy, we also want OCR intelligence, as if to say, if we do have these embedded documents, we want those to be recognized as well. Even though they're not a quote unquote Word document by definition of the rule, we still want them to be recognized as part of that transformation. And similarly speaking, I know we saw it in that PowerPoint, but just showing you as well in sort of real time what this budget spreadsheet looks like. So we have 3 different sheets embedded within this Excel spreadsheet. Each has its own set of data. We have some pie charts here. So for example, a 3D chart with percentages across, and we saw that other image had sort of flattened this graph and the percentages were all over the place. So if I go ahead now, and I will go ahead and pull up these outputs, what you'll be able to see is 2 different things. So I'll start here with the budget page, or the budget spreadsheet. So what you see here is a rendition of that spreadsheet, in sort of a one-to-one rendition. You can see here that the graphs are still 3D, fully preserved. You can also see, so if I take a look at the spreadsheet, we have, as I mentioned, 3 different sheets here within the overall Excel file with expenses, income, and profit loss. And if I go back here, those have been converted into bookmarks. So now everything is fully searchable. Everything's been scanned one-to-one. I have bookmarks. And similarly, if I take a look back at this Word document, again, you can see here, this was fully an image. And if I come back here, this has now been fully scanned. Even the text embedded is fully text searchable, so that you don't necessarily have to worry about, well, I passed in a document, but there were all these other embedded images or files that aren't coming out on the other end. And that's certainly something we've seen with comparative vendors. But with our solution, we're able to still, as well as the text you see above, recognize and make the text in here fully searchable within this embedded image as well.
Yeah, perfect. So, so really, this is kind of very important when you get to these regulatory submissions, or even trying to search and find content within your organization. So an image is typically copied in. You would like that image to be text searchable as part of any other text layer. Well, AdLib does that really, really well. There are other file types or embedded images like Visio files, CAD/CAM images that, the competitive solutions really just don't render all that well. They get a great OCR accuracy rate, which is what they promote and market. But really what we're looking for is what you see, what you get output. And that's really one of the compelling reasons that AdLib is used in many of these regulated industries. So if you move to the following topic in the next slide here. And the next one here is around reprioritization of mission critical documents. So one of the things that we introduced earlier in the year was something called a high performance engine. And what this meant was we have the ability to render more than one document at a time. So prior to 2023.1, which is the release I'm talking to, it was first in, first out. So a document hits the queue, that document then goes into the processing state, and then it hits the output folder. And it happened every time in that way. Now, if you had a document that was high priority, but it's stuck way down deep in the queue, kind of maybe you're missing your SLA, you're not really using your server, or, and the resource requirements all that well because a higher priority document is sitting well behind. What we introduce here is this opportunity to reprioritize jobs. So what Kunal is about to show you is he's going to submit a series of jobs. He's then going to pause that queue so that we can show you these jobs are held, show you how you can reprioritize those jobs within the queue. And then we'll talk a little bit more after you see that demo.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and I just have some sample Word documents here, and I'm going to go ahead and drop those into my input folder. So a couple different things that I can call out here. One is you'll see that this jobs and queue counter is going to start to populate, and you can see that some documents are already in processing, and I'm going to go ahead and flip this switch here from maintenance mode. And so what I've done here is you can see that we have numerous jobs that are already in flight in active process, and you can see my queue counter is starting to build up. Now, what I did when I went ahead and put it in maintenance mode is we've seen various instances where you want to pause your queue for a moment to troubleshoot, to patch an engine, to migrate an engine, to do some performance tuning. What we don't want to do and what we don't want to see, and this is again directly from the voice of the customer, is this shouldn't be a painful process of just simple server administration, meaning you shouldn't have to stop your process manager. You shouldn't have to take down connectors. That leads to system-wide interruptions. That leads to orphan documents where jobs are now being failed and have to be manually tracked down, picked up, thrown back in, and resubmitted. But rather what you want to be able to do is when I put it into maintenance mode, you can see here that the documents that were picked up for processing down here were completed successfully. So just because I threw maintenance mode on in the middle of processing didn't mean the engine was going to say stop everything and fail everything. It's going to finish what it was working on, but then it's actually going to shut off its queue. So as you can see here, we have 8 jobs that are sitting here at the ready, but nothing is actually being picked up. My engine is in an idle state so that I have that ability to go ahead and actually patch my engine, do whatever it is that I need to do. For the purpose of the demo, I wanted to pause it so I could show you that the next set of documents, and I have them sequentially numbered, so it's a little easier to follow as well. You can see here that they've been grabbed so far in order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The next set of documents that are going to be picked up, and I have it set to being able to run 5 jobs in parallel, are these next 5 jobs here, because right now all of them are set to a priority 3. So when all of them are set to priority 3, it's sort of a first in, first out process. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the first 3 jobs at the top of the list, and I'm going to change those to a priority 1. So now what I fully expect is once I turn off maintenance mode and my engine is ready to start picking up some jobs, you're going to see that these priority 1 jobs get picked up by the first 3 threads, I'll call it, and then the remaining 2 threads are going to still go by that first come, first serve logic and grab these 2 remaining documents down here. One thing, Anthony, that you reminded me of as you were talking that I can show here as well is this idea of high performance engine. So you can see here that I only have one machine here called KB65. It's in the idle state. And traditionally, once I turned off maintenance mode, again, it would be 1 in, 1 out. So KB65 would take a job, spit it out, and then take the next one. And when I go ahead and turn off maintenance mode, what you'll see is a few things. One, this has gone ahead and spun up 5 threads to now action 5 jobs in parallel. You can see where the jobs came from. You can get the job ID in case you want to drill into the logs. You can also see how long it's been working on a particular set of jobs. And then number 2, you can see here that these first 3 jobs that I escalated to a priority 1, and actually let me drag this column into view so it's easier to follow. These first 3 jobs that were reprioritized to number 1 were picked up by the first 3 available threads by my engine worker. And then the remaining 2 threads follow that sort of first come, first serve. Everything else is a priority 3. So then it jumped over to collect test 7, test 8 as well. And now you can see here with a refresh that my priority 1 documents or my mission critical documents in this case were completed. And now the final 3 documents are being completed as well. So a few different things that we could see there in that little demonstration.
Yeah, there was a lot packed in there. We'll kind of unpack it in a few minutes, but just a following question. So this is an admin experience. And right now, you acting as the admin are the one prioritizing or reprioritizing the jobs. That's not likely how it's going to happen in real life, where the business process should dictate where these jobs are and how these jobs are prioritized. So can you speak a little bit potentially so, how you can actually build the prioritization into the rule set itself?
Yeah, actually, this ties in really well, I think, to one thing I was speaking of up at the top. And this is when we go back to the idea of different workflows. And I think even if I just think to what you were talking about up at the top, with like some documents are more mission critical, they're more important, some documents aren't. The same way I was saying you could define different workflows for different transformation rules. If we think back to this concept again of transformation job acceptance rules, where maybe you want different workflows for different processes such as headers and footers, security, OCR, just bare bones conversion. You can also go ahead and start defining that based on these job acceptance rules. So I know everything coming from default instruction set is super mission critical. So what I can do is I can actually go ahead and define the job priority. And in this case, I've defined it just as a default value of 3. But if I know these are going to be extremely mission critical, I can change that to 1. I can make that whatever I want. And in another set of instructions, so for my OCR documents, I know that those are important, but they're not as important. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a priority 3 or a priority 2, and I'll make this one a priority 4. And so what you start to do is, based on your understanding of the documents, as you said, it shouldn't have to always be an admin in flight changing that value. So I'm going to go ahead and do that up front because I understand my repository. But of course, over the course of the day, if there are any changing business demands, anything that suddenly was unexpectedly changed, I'm now equipped with that ability to sort of go off script and reprioritize those documents on the fly, regardless of what I configured them to be before submission.
Yeah, perfect. And while we're on this instruction set screen,
Yeah.
so clearly these are instruction sets that were established by the administrator, somebody knowledgeable about the the business process. If there was like an application that's used by the organization, and that application wanted to pass an instruction set to transform for that, with the rule set, with the header and footer information, encryption information, so on and so forth, even priority information, is that possible? Do you need to have this pre-established, or can the application itself pass along an instruction set into transform?
No, so we actually have the ability to do just that. So with these XML tickets, what you are able to do is define these specific set of rules and define exactly what you've seen within these instruction sets to be able to pass that along without having to do this admin pre-configure step. So it could even be at a per job level. So actually, again, I'll go back to before we talked about one specific workflow, then we talked about expanding that to multiple different workflows for a set of jobs. Now what we're talking about is actually just on a very specific per job level. So when you're sending in these tickets, what you're saying is for this job or for this document, the set of documents that I want to merge, this set of documents I want to split, I want it to be sent in specifically with a priority one, specifically with a timeout value of like 120 seconds or 5 minutes, specifically with this dynamic metadata. So I even think I saw maybe a question in the chat that was asking about making it a dynamic header or applying an image. So certainly, so let's say I wanted to apply for one ticket, for one set of jobs, the AdLib logo as the header. And then somewhere within a watermark, I wanted to apply a watermark that tells me the exact date and time of the rendition, which is more of a dynamic value as opposed to the static value you saw me input in earlier. You're more than equipped to do that as well with exactly what you're describing. So I hope that answers your question as well as the other question I saw in the chat just as we were going along.
Yeah, appreciate it. So just kind of just unpack what we've seen here. This is kind of demo kind of evolved, live. We talked about high performance engines so that your one engine or one server that you may have in place now has the opportunity to process many jobs at once.
Yeah.
And that's a configurable setting. So Kunal set his to 5, but it can be many more than 5. So this is a tremendous, cost and resource savings, as one server simply can do so much more with the same resource capacity. With that, we now have the opportunity to prioritize jobs thanks to that multi-threading. You saw that as part of the demo. So there was a lot in there, and it's tremendously powerful, and it saves a bunch of money for customers that already have servers deployed, looking to upgrade, maybe minimize or reduce the number of servers that they have in place. But more importantly, get your documents out faster is really the outcome. So, Kunal, if you don't mind going back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so the next one really is more of a theoretical. Really can't demo this all that well. So if you just move to the next slide, it's really about containerization. So this is tremendously valuable to those customers and partners that are interested in simplifying the task of deploying servers, of simplifying the task of duplicating servers, but more importantly, to get to the point of elastically scalability. So what this allows you as an organization to do is to, once you have your AdLib server engine deployed the way you want it and configured the way you want it, you can wrap that into a container that is now your container, which represents your environment, and you can reuse that container any which way you want. So whether that be from server migration or for elastically scaling, but really this was a high customer demand and something that we have implemented with this particular release. So Kunal, I'll pass it over to you. If there's anything you'd like to add to that, please do.
Yeah, actually, I think one thing that I'd like to highlight here, if one thing that we've also specifically been focusing on is voice of the customer. And with the implementation of containerization, of course, one thing you're instantly getting out of this is you're continuing to modernize your deployment, you're continuing to modernize your software and match up your ability to meet those who have this demand of containerization, who want this ideal end state server infrastructure. That's already one major benefit. But one thing we've also understood is Transform in itself does a job, and it does it very well with what we've seen so far. But what we can do to make it even better and further equip our clients and partners even better is you have these transformation engines that we've seen work on all these different documents. And over the course of the day, and one thing we'll actually touch on in a moment here is the analytics. Over the course of the day and using your analytics, you can even see sort of where your performance and your requirements are a little lower, and when you start to hit sort of a peak over the course of a day, week, month, whatever it is. And you have to sort of, at least traditionally, prepare yourself for that by scaling up your server infrastructure, scaling up your environment to be ready to manage those peak loads. But in the instance where the peak is passed, you're sort of starting to go downhill, you need someone monitoring and changing that server infrastructure to save on those costs, because if not, those engines are now licensed, those servers are now active, and you're now actively paying for them when they're maybe not actually in use or really required. So when we have this, when you think of this concept of rapid scaling, really what that means is, even if you look at the image here, these engines, the server infrastructure is going to come up as you need it, and then it's going to scale down as you don't need it, meaning you're not necessarily paying for what you don't need, you're not paying for what you're not using, and that instantly equips our users with even more efficient resource utilization. So now we're providing you with the metrics to be prepared for this, and we're preparing you and giving you the deployment and the technology and the tools from a server standpoint and more practical standpoint to actually generate those server infrastructure savings. And I think finally, one of the, of course, benefits you get with containerization is the overall deployment process of Transform becomes a lot more simplified just by nature of the ease of containerization as well. So a lot of key benefits there that came directly from understanding customer stories, customer pain points, especially some of the more complex deployments with our partners as well, which is another reason to be excited about this.
Yeah, outstanding. Thank you, Kunal. Once, Kunal mentioned this was by, strong customer demand. We've already piloted this with a few customers at large scale, and they've already seen tremendous value as an outcome of this release alone. So thank you, Kunal. Next slide, please.
Sure.
All right, so performance monitoring. So Kunal hinted in the last conversation around containerization and around analytics. So if you go to the next slide, we were very pleased with what we released in 2023.1. That was released in the early part of this year. And what you see on the left is what we had with 2023.1. And Kunal will actually demonstrate this if you're not familiar with it. But we provided an analytics dashboard, which helps you understand the utilization of your servers, the number of documents going through your servers, the document types that are going through your servers, and you can cut it, by any date range you want. And it's really providing tremendous information around the care and health and usage of your particular servers that you have in your environment. And there was many customers that appreciated that. But the next logical step was, hey, we already have a performance monitoring systems in our environment, whether it be Grafana, Nagios, Splunk, any number of them, even just Windows performance monitoring. So the request came in, can we now take the data that's within the analytics dashboard and use that in our third-party system? So what we did with this 2023.2 release is exactly that. So I'll pass the baton over to Kunal to show you the analytics dashboard and even the Grafana integration.
For sure. Yeah, so as you mentioned, so what you should be seeing on the screen is the analytics dashboard. I'll give that a second there. So this is just a direct image of what you just saw on the slide, and this speaks to what Anthony was just talking about, and that's, we have all these analytics that we've added, and you can go back as far as you want, as long as you've had the product, to be able to retrieve these analytics. And almost instantly, what we heard in numerous different presentations, demonstrations, almost to the point where I asked myself why I didn't think of it, is this integration with application performance monitoring tools, which means these analytics are great and they're going to help people solve real problems. But at the end of the day, these widgets are great, these stats are great, but what if I have my own tool and I don't want to constantly have to go into AdLib and check the analytics or check for these real-time metrics, even the engine dashboard, the job status table? What if I want to do that all in-house And at that point, you can also go ahead and then configure your own alerts, create your own widgets. So what we've done is we've gone ahead and integrated to start with Grafana. And so what this now allows us to do is you can take a look here. I've just created two very simple widgets. But what you can do is now, this is talking directly to AdLib. So if you take a look at my dashboard here, we have 2 machines, 263 jobs, 3.6K pages. And I take a look back here, and all these metrics are aligning, and these are the metrics of also what I've been processing in real time in front of you here today. And what you can start to see and understand is, number one, I don't have to log into AdLib to view these metrics. I can create my own dashboards and my own widgets now. So I just created these very quickly. And I'm sure if you're more familiar with Grafana, or if you're more familiar with your application performance monitoring tools, because we definitely have the intention to expand this beyond just Grafana, you can go ahead and create your own alerting mechanisms as well based on specific widgets. So if X amount of jobs fail, or if a job is processing for X amount of time, you can now be equipped to get those alerts directly in your own labs, in your own systems, in your own environments without ever leaving them and without having to log into AdLib. So I think we took a very exciting step in 2023.1 with introducing these analytics. And I think we're going to continue further expanding on that like we've done in 2023.2 to equip you as much as we can with all the analytics we can provide and push them up directly to your systems, your environment, so you don't have to go into AdLib to do that monitoring and hands-on proactive issue resolution and whatnot.
Yeah, perfect, Kunal. So thank you. You already mentioned that we're not stopping with Grafana. This was like the first to tease this out. The integration is working extremely well. The data can be cut and used in any number of dashboards that you wish to create. And for those that are managing the performance of your mission critical servers in the environment, this is a welcome step. While the analytics dashboard within AdLib is great, this really gives you the alerting that you need and the proactive care that you might need to keep your mission critical servers up and running. So if you have any suggestions along the way, or like to comment on the types of performance monitoring systems that you may be using in your environment, please shout them out in the QA or even after, and we'd be more than happy to consider. Okay, so the next topic is around this regulatory validator. And this was yet another example of direct customer and partner feedback here. So many of our customers are dealing with documents that are important to them internally, but are also submitted for regulatory approval. And these regulatory agencies, such as the FDA if you're in the US, or the EMA if you're in Europe, and various dozens of others, they have certain ways that you need to submit your documents in. And in many cases, if you don't submit these documents technically correct, meaning the font sizes are where they need to be, the paper sizes where they need to be, blank pages have been removed, there's a table of contents where required, the hyperlinks are a certain color. These technical issues tend to lead towards failures or rejections from these governing bodies. Now, even if you're not using or part of an organization that submits externally, you probably have internal to your company standards for your document types, how things are marked confidential or internal use only, pagination, how your headers and footers should look, so on and so forth. So what we really have built here is this notion of having your documents validated through AdLib. So for those things that you want to check or are important for a particular submission, are checked prior to them being submitted to avoid that failure, to avoid that rejection, saving time of the rejection and the follow-on rework. So Kunal is going to actually take you through a demo of what this looks like in configurability, and also maybe even throw some documents through the system so you can see the outcome.
Yeah, so I'm back in another default instruction set. And so what you have here is, again, similarly to what you saw before, if you want this aspect of validation, first of all, don't need to be an expert. You can filter, search, find what you're looking for. I already have the rule on the right-hand side here. So if I go ahead and take a look at what we have, there's a couple different things that you can do from a configuration perspective, which I find really neat. Number one is you can define 2 output folders. So free the concept for a moment that I showed up at the top of the input and output folder. We don't want validation specific jobs and validator specific use cases to have to comb through the same folders that were previously defined to find what you were looking for. So what we have done is you can now define a failed and success report folder. And I've gone ahead and defined those folder paths already. And what this allows me to do is, if there are any validations that failed, that didn't meet the requirements of what I'm about to walk you through down below here, and exactly what Anthony was just speaking to up at the top there, we're going to generate reports in that specific area path that will allow you to understand what document failed validation, why did it fail validation, what element failed, on what page did it fail on, so that you're equipped with all the information you need to remediate these documents and ensure that when you're sending them in to whatever regulatory bodies or for any specific processes, you're doing so with a high confidence and success rate for approval. And so what we have a look down here is I just have one of these rules set up here, and this is going to be the validation of no blank pages. I chose this one because I think it's very simple to articulate and demo as well, and that's just true or false. Are there blank pages included in the document, which is not allowed for specific approval for the FDA? But if you take a look here, we have numerous different options, and I also want to make certain that it's clear that this is not sort of here's our PDF validator and we're done with it. This is something that we're going to continue to expand and grow over the coming releases. And we already have planned expansion and growth for our first release of 2024. But just to show what we have so far, so for example, we have a rule here for initial view. So what is the default page layout? Do we want to open the document on the first page, whether or not that's required, and did it happen or not? What's the default page zoom? Go ahead and unselect that. File size limit. So there's different file size limits for different forms of submission, whether it's FDA or EMA submission. When you're submitting like a passport photo, there's file size limits. So what do you want your file size limit to be? In megabytes, we have the ability to define what those page sizes and page orientation looks like as well. So validation of letter A4, validation of PDF versions. So I think for FDA, it's maybe 1.4 and 1.7. So was that met? Is it the correct and valid version for submission? Fast web view. We also have, Anthony spoke to fonts. So are fonts types required? Do they have to be embedded fonts? Are hyperlinks all required to be blue? Because if there are any black hyperlinks, you're going to want that to be caught for FDA submission. We don't want any underlined links. And then similarly, a validation of hyperlinks and bookmarks as well with very specific specifications and very specific items that are going to be required depending on what it is that you're submitting for. But again, just for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to keep it just to no blank pages. Let me actually pause there. I know that was a lot, Anthony. Anything that sort of jumps out? Any questions about that for now, or do you want me to continue?
No, so why don't you go continue the demo, and while you're getting that ready, I'll talk to you. So what you saw here was a highly configurable set for PDF attributes. Now, we spoke earlier about pixel perfect rendering. You see that Kunal submitting 3 jobs, one of which has a blank page in it. We spoke about pixel perfect rendering, and we can catch documents that potentially don't conform, but it is not our job nor our desire to actually change the document in any way, because we actually have to keep the document pixel perfect. So while we're flagging these errors, in some cases we can correct the errors. In some cases, the originator of the document needs to correct the error. So, you may ask yourself, why can't you just fix them? Well, in some cases that kind of flies in the face of the pixel perfect rendering component of this. So there are things that we flag and the user needs to fix. There are some things that we flag we can technically fix through AdLib Transform. Okay, Kunal, so I see that you submitted 3 jobs there.
Yep. So what we have here, if we can focus on this document type name, or excuse me, document name column for a moment. So we have 3 documents I submitted. One is going to be there were no blank pages, and we have that called out in the document, so it's easy to follow. And you can see this completed successfully. We have 2 other documents that I submitted here. One had a blank page in the middle of the document, and one had a blank page at the final page of the document. And you can see those were completed as failed. So if I go back here to my job settings, you'll see here that I have defined a folder report for failed validations. I'm going to focus on this one more than the successful validations for now. So if I go back into that folder path, and I go into my failed validation, you'll see that we're generating an XML file here. So if I take a look at the middle blank page, for example, I can see here that a blank page was found on page 2, and this is always going to be sort of under the error message tag. And what this allows me to now understand is not only was it what specific document failed, first of all, so I know the input file name, which is the middle page blank.pdf, and then what was the exact error code, or what was a summary of the error message, which is that no blank pages failed. And it failed because a blank page was detected on page 2. So this is now allowing me to understand why exactly specific validation failed. And similar to what I mentioned up at the top of how we are going to be looking to expand this validator in terms of the features added, we're also going to love to hear any feedback, any items that you might want to see, just not even in terms of what needs to be validated, but in terms of this specific path that we just went through. defining a report folder, submitting a document, it fails validation, and then you track down the folder, you look through an XML file. We're open to all feedback and understanding how we can make this validator as easy and seamless to use as possible while providing the end purpose and end goal that it was originally defined for, which Anthony spoke to up at the top. But I'll pause there again, Anthony.
No, I think that's a great summary of a very cool feature. We find that for those that are dealing both with external submissions, this is really impactful, but even for your internal documents. But I do have one question, Kunal. Like here, we're using AdLib Transform for the creation of these PDF documents. What if there was a document that wasn't converted or transformed through AdLib? Can those documents still be put through the validator?
That's actually a really good question, something I should have covered. So one of the things that I wanted to mention here is, even if it wasn't a document generated through AdLib, the benefit you get of using Transform for this use case is, let's say this PDF came from any other area and you want to start by validating it. So no blank pages, PDF version, page size, what have you, and any of those validations come back as false. So first part of the question, or first answer to the question is, even if it wasn't generated using AdLib, we will still be able to fully validate that PDF. And in future versions and future iterations, that's not going to change. So it does not have to be rendered through AdLib to be validated by AdLib. Step two is, once you've gone ahead and you've validated these documents and you've seen certain elements have come back, the benefit of using Transform is you're using a solution that is validating for several components that it can also help you correct. So one thing that we pride ourselves on, as I've showed you, is all these different conversion options, all these different PDF processing, post-processing, OCR options, image processing. So for certain elements that aren't coming back, at the end of the day, you're using a fully robust end-to-end document transformation, document assembly suite that will allow you to then remediate those issues and correct different elements that originally came back as failed validation. So I think one part of my answer is the answer to your question. The other part is sort of the next step that you take from there, regardless of where that document came from.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Good response as well. So we can move back to the PowerPoint. I think we're kind of rounding the bend here. All right, so key takeaways, and I'll give my thoughts here. I'll allow Kunal to do the same. This is an exciting release for us. We're talking about Transform 2023.2. We've also referenced 2023.1 earlier in the presentation numerous times within. You can see that we're on a 2 release cycle per year, and that's not going to change. So our commitment to innovation and release is evident in what we're doing today. What you saw today was around connectivity and operability, ease of deployment through containerization, data security, performance and scaling, also with containerization, high performance engines, job prioritization, helping to reduce your server footprint. So even if you have the same exact workflow, same exact throughput, you can simply save more money at the resource level by mitigating and potentially removing some of the servers that you have. And lastly, around regulatory compliance. So that this is a big release for us. It comes on the heels of an exciting release at the beginning of the year. And we're quite excited about the roadmap that we're bringing forward. So Kunal, anything you'd like to add here before I move on?
Oh, no, I think that covers everything from mine as well.
I appreciate it. So, the question on the right is time to upgrade. Well, we'll get to that in a second, but when you take a look at what we've done here, we really pride ourselves, the entire product management organization, on voice of customer. So yes, we have our ideas and thoughts about what the product should do and could do, but really it comes down to having conversations with real users or potential users. And this release, in addition to what we've also done with 2023.1, was largely driven by customer demand. So any feedback that you have will largely be considered. We'll absolutely come back, let you know the outcome of that, and maybe even come back with some requirements gathering. So we really pride ourselves on listening and making good on the commitments as a result of those conversations. So next slide is potentially on this upgrade piece. So if you're on a prior version of 2023.1, meaning you don't have 2023.1 and you're on like 6.5 or something prior, you really don't have access to the analytics engine. So it's hard to determine the performance gains that you'll see or the potential resource reductions that you might gain. So what AdLib has done is built this little application that you can run on your existing system. You don't need to have 2023.1 or the 2023.2. You can actually run this on your prior system version. And what this does is responds back with the same analytics information, number of engines you have, the documents that are being throughput, the number of pages, so on and so forth, so that we actually can build a very sophisticated model as a potential savings that you might see in your resource and server levels using these potential new releases. So if you're interested in understanding the potential cost savings as a result of high performance engines and so on, takes a small utility to run, it takes minutes to get, and the information we gather helps us build the business case for a potential migration and upgrade. Okay, and I believe that's it for the formal presentation. I'm going to do my job moderating as best I can here the questions that were coming in. I'll just take them in the order that they were entered. Can you only connect to DMS or other business applications too? So what I'll say here, and Kunal, feel free to weigh in, is we have our standard set of connectors that we've built. These are the ones that are largely used by organizations very consistently and repetitively. But we also have this kind of notion of open API, the REST API and SOAP as well, which we're deprecating, by the way. But you have the opportunity to use those to integrate it to other business applications. This is an area of extreme interest for us because we pride ourselves on being, very advanced middleware, and middleware requires that we have interoperability. So if there are any other applications that are very important to you, feel free to speak up. We'd be more than happy to take a look and build the integration. Kunal, anything you'd like to add there?
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay, we are using an older version of AdLib. We have lots of rules defined in our system. When we upgrade to this version, are the rules automatically transferred over? Kunal, you want to take the lead here?
Yeah, absolutely. So every single version that we put out from the older versions of AdLib, when we started with 6.5, 2023.1, 2023.2, are all backwards compatible in the sense of the ability to export your rules and then be able to import them into your new environment. So it's not as necessarily automatic. However, it is very simple and easy to do. We have numerous customers that have already done it. So this is battle tested as well. So it's just going to be exporting the rules prior to the upgrade so that by the time you migrate to the new version, we just open up the job settings page. I continued to show there's a little action there that allows you to import. And then we just drop in your rules from the previous version and everything will populate with no inconsistencies because no prior rules or anything were deprecated along the way. So everything should be taken care of upon upgrade.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, the word middleware, it's really important. It's really important for us to make certain that we have tested. So it's not just like building compatibility, but we're actually doing regression testing to make certain that this is true and that it works as expected. The next question is, we are using an older version of AdLib. Is this a reinstall? Can we upgrade? So Kunal, can you take that one as well?
Yep, absolutely. So this is going to be, you are able to upgrade, and all upgrades from previous versions are tested as well. This is going to be sort of a rip and replace of previous versions of the product. Now, this is really done so to also make sure that there are numerous different engines that are being baked in that have been baked in from previous versions. Now, one of the things that is exciting is this new sort of tool that we've generated and that we are advising everyone to use upon an upgrade, which has greatly simplified even the most complex of upgrade scenarios that we've seen. And it's called the sort of like installation assistant. And what this allows you to do is it very seamlessly and easily does many of the prerequisite checks, as well as automates a lot of steps along the installation process. And we, as I've mentioned, this again is another battle tested tool. We've seen it handle one of our most complex environments with one of our larger partners, to 2023.2. So this is something that we absolutely encourage. So although that is still sort of a rip and replace process, it is greatly simplified, in my opinion, as compared to what we've seen in the past. With containerization and that automated deployment infrastructure, as well as planned initiatives in the future, we're always aiming to upgrade that installation and upgrade process with every release. And Anthony, I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like to add in there.
Well, I have one point to add. So keep in mind with the high performance engines and even with some of the containerization, you may not need as many engines as you had before. So if you had 10 engines, potentially through the high performance engines, you may only need 4, just making that up theoretically. So while it is reinstall, the number of times you're installing may be significantly less than prior versions. Okay, there's a question about threads, so multi-threading. So if threads are busy with a large job and we submit a new job with a higher priority, what will the engine do? Will it stop in-flight jobs or wait for one of those threads to complete the current job? So I'll take a stab at this. Maybe I'll show that I'm wrong, and Kunal, feel free to correct it. If a job is sitting in queue, of course, any job that comes in with higher priority will jump to the front of that queue. But if something is already kind of in the processing state where the job is actively being ripped by an engine, being converted, transformed, assembled, published, it's my understanding that will not be halted in any way. That job will complete, and then the next priority job will come in following that. So Kunal, feel free to correct if I misrepresented.
No, that's correct. Nothing in flight will ever just stop or terminate, whether it's maintenance mode, whether it's reprioritize jobs. Anything that's in flight will always be completed and seen through to completion, and then the next highest priority job will be ingested.
Okay, perfect. The next one is seemingly just a thumbs up on performance monitoring, saying email notification will come in very handy. I'll just add that not necessarily our capability, but it's not only email notification, it's likely SMS notification, so text messages as well, depending on the performance monitoring system you have. So notifications as a whole will be significantly improved. Validator sounds neat. Seems like there are a number of validation rules predefined by AdLib. How easy is it to add our own? So can I want you to grab this one?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the way it's currently built is, and I think this we were also able to see this in the demo. It's very highly configurable, but the way it's configurable right now are the rules that are currently dropped into that instruction set or into that validator rule setting that I showed you during the demo. So we provide full configurability. We're aiming to provide full configurability of everything that's already dropped in there. If you wanted to add your own, it's going to be, as of now, at least, the process of just working with you to understand what is it that you would like to have validated? Is there anything that's currently not existing that you would like to see in the rules? So for example, we have a rule for file size. If you want it to be 100 megabytes, 200 megabytes, 7 gigabytes, that you can define today because the rule is existing with full configurability. But if there's a rule that's currently not existing, as it works today, is we want to collaborate with you, as Anthony mentioned, to understand what are different components and mission critical elements of documents that you want to make sure we're checking for and that we're including as part of our validation offerings, so that those are prepared for you in future offerings of the product and future releases of Transform. Anthony, anything to add there?
No, perfect. Thank you so much. The next one here is we just renewed, and thank you for that. Do we have to wait until the next renewal to roll this out? So really, this is kind of there's multiple answers here depending on your contract and what you just upgraded to and from and so on. But the answer is yes. I say no. You don't have to wait till the next renewal to roll this out. If you're on current pricing, the most current price scheme that AdLib has, it's really a subscription. So you're paying for a certain page volume, and we don't care what version you're on, so long as it's on the supported versions list, whether that be 2023.1 or 24.2, whenever that comes out, you can upgrade at any time. If you're on a previous version in a previous pricing model, you still don't have to wait until you upgrade. We would love to be able to solve your business problems today, and if that requires a potential upgrade in technology, we'd be more than willing to take your organization through the steps required for that. Kunal, anything you'd like to add on I think that question's pretty clear.
I think that covers it.
Yeah, perfect. And then the last one here is a follow-up question to the upgrade. Will we have to stop all AdLib workflows to upgrade? They have mission critical jobs that are being processed by AdLib at all times. So I guess the question is, technically, how do you upgrade a system without actually halting any of the work that system might be doing?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think this is one that I would like to follow up with after the presentation or after the webinar is over. I think that's one that I'd want to double check with our services and engineering teams, just to see if there are any upgrade paths that we have for this specific use case. And then I'm happy to circle back following the webinar with that answer.
Okay, perfect. Well, that is the list of questions that were submitted by the group here. So I'd like to thank you for your time. I don't know if there's a following slide which gives some information about AdLib or not.
This is it.
But we do appreciate your time today. It is an exciting release. As we mentioned multiple times before, your feedback is welcome. Your feedback will absolutely be considered. So feel free to keep your thoughts coming. We'll be on this release cycle 2 times per year. We'd love to have you at each of these kind of events where we showcase the technology, and hopefully one day you'll see some of the capability that you've requested in these webinars as well. So thank you for your time, and Kunal, thank you for your demo.
Absolutely.